For survivors of domestic violence, escaping an abusive relationship often represents the first step toward reclaiming their lives and safety. However, for many, the journey toward freedom doesn't end with separation. Instead, it transforms into a new form of abuse that operates within the legal system: post-separation legal abuse. This insidious form of violence weaponizes court processes, custody battles, and financial proceedings to continue the pattern of control and intimidation that defined the original abusive relationship. This video will explore the trauma-centered nature of post-separation legal abuse, examining how domestic violence survivors become vulnerable to this form of abuse, and discuss the psychological impact on those navigating this complex legal landscape. Understanding post-separation legal abuse. Post-separation legal abuse refers to the systemic manipulation of legal systems and processes to harass, intimidate, and control a former partner. Unlike physical violence, legal abuse operates through seemingly legitimate channels: family courts, child custody proceedings, and financial litigation, making it particularly difficult to recognize and address. Common tactics include filing excessive or frivolous motions to force the survivor into court repeatedly, using children as pawns by seeking inappropriate custody agreements, making false accusations of abuse or unfitness, concealing assets or manipulating financial disclosures, dragging out procedures to exhaust the survivor's resources. This form of abuse leverages power imbalances within the legal system, where abusers often have more financial resources and familiarity with legal processes than their victims. The abuse becomes particularly traumatic because it occurs within institutions designed to provide protection and justice, creating a profound sense of betrayal and hopelessness. The transition from domestic violence to legal abuse. The connection between domestic violence and post-separation legal abuse is both direct and complex. Several factors contribute to why survivors of domestic violence often become victims of legal abuse. Power and control dynamics. The core motivation behind domestic violence is power and control, not just physical violence. When physical proximity ends after separation, abusers often seek new avenues to maintain control over their victims. The legal system provides an ideal platform for this continuation of control dynamics. As researcher Joan Meyer notes, for many abusers, the courtroom becomes a new weapon of choice when physical access is restricted. Systemic vulnerabilities. Survivors of domestic violence often enter the legal system with significant disadvantages: economic dependency resulting from financial abuse during the relationship, trauma-related symptoms that can undermine credibility in court, lack of resources for quality legal representation, emotional exhaustion from the original abuse. These vulnerabilities are frequently exploited by abusers who understand how to manipulate legal processes to their advantage. Institutional blind spots. Family courts and legal systems often fail to recognize the continuum of abuse from domestic violence to legal abuse. Judges and attorneys may view excessive litigation as high conflict, rather than recognizing it as continuation of abusive patterns. This institutional blindness enables abusers to continue their control tactics under the guise of vigorous legal representation. The trauma impact of legal abuse. The trauma inflicted by post-separation legal abuse differs from, but compounds the trauma of domestic violence. Several unique characteristics make this form of abuse particularly devastating. Prolonged duration. While physical abuse might occur in discrete episodes, legal abuse can continue for years or even decades. The protracted nature of court proceedings means survivors experience chronic stress and trauma without resolution. This extended duration can lead to complex PTSD symptoms, including hypervigilance, emotional dysregulation, and a persistent sense of threat. Systemic re-traumatization. Legal abuse forces survivors to repeatedly recount traumatic experiences, often in adversarial settings where their credibility is challenged. This process of re-traumatization occurs when institutions expected to provide protection, creating a profound sense of betrayal. The requirement to maintain composure while discussing trauma can exacerbate psychological harm. Financial devastation. The economic impact of legal abuse creates additional trauma through the loss of security and stability. Abusers often intentionally prolong proceedings to drain financial resources, forcing survivors to choose between legal representation and basic needs. This economic abuse can result in housing instability, food insecurity, and dependence on social services. Identity erosion. Legal abuse attacks survivors' identities as parents, partners, and competent adults. False accusations of unfitness, manipulation of evidence, and court-imposed restrictions can undermine self-worth and confidence. This identity erosion compounds the damage already inflicted during the abusive relationship. Parent-child relationship damage. Perhaps most tragically, legal abuse often targets the parent-child relationship. Abusers may manipulate children, make false allegations, or create barriers to contact, inflicting secondary trauma on both survivor and child. The survivor experiences the profound pain of watching their relationship with their children deteriorate due to the abuser's tactics. Recognizing and addressing legal abuse. To combat post-separation legal abuse, several approaches are necessary. Legal system reforms. Training for judges and attorneys on recognizing domestic violence patterns in legal proceedings. Implementation of screening tools to identify power and control dynamics. Sanctions against abusive litigation tactics. Specialized courts for domestic violence cases. Survivor support. Trauma-informed legal services that understand the connection between domestic violence and legal abuse. Support groups specifically for those experiencing legal abuse. Mental health services addressing the unique trauma of legal system manipulation. Financial assistance for legal representation. Documentation and evidence. Creating comprehensive records of abuse patterns, documenting legal abuse tactics for court recognition, developing expert testimony on legal abuse dynamics. Community awareness. Educating the public about legal abuse as a form of domestic violence. Creating resources for recognizing legal abuse patterns. Advocacy for a policy change addressing this form of abuse. Post-separation legal abuse represents a particularly insidious continuation of domestic violence that operates through systems designed to provide protection. For survivors of domestic violence, the courtroom can become a new battlefield where control and intimidation tactics are disguised as legitimate legal action. The trauma inflicted by this form of abuse is profound, affecting financial stability, parental relationships, and psychological well-being. Understanding the connection between domestic violence and legal abuse is crucial for developing effective interventions and support systems. By recognizing legal abuse as a continuation of domestic violence rather than a separate issue, we can better address the unique needs of survivors navigating this complex terrain. Only through trauma-informed approaches, systemic reforms, and specialized support can we hope to break the cycle of abuse that extends far beyond physical separation and into the very institutions meant to provide protection and justice.